Our next peer reviewer is Manny Soto. Manny comes from a city perspective. Manny is with the City of Orlando, an extensive partner working with Orange County, understands the nuances between county and city and brings that city perspective to this review. And I would tell you that Manny has dealt with a number of major disasters over the last several years. The Pulse nightclub shooting, right now he's still actively engaged, as well as I think Alan is too a little bit with the MARC program, which is multi-agency reception centers coming with citizens coming from Puerto Rico into Central Florida. Also responded and dealt with Irma. Manny brings a great amount of experience to this review, and we're glad to have him here. Manny, please.
First of all, thank you for the kind invitation to be here. It's always super to see what other communities are doing in reference to responding to a natural disaster. I'm going to be talking about a power issue, and all of you know that once we have power back in our home and the AC is running and the refrigerator is functioning, the sense of normalcy kicks in. What we want to do is make sure that through this process that we have great tie-in and partnership efforts with our electric company, making sure they're in our EOC, making sure they're accessible to be able to communicate with in the event. And I'm sure that all the elected officials here get the calls from your constituents asking, how come my neighbor across the street has power and I don't have power? What's going on that the street in the subdivision next to us has power and we don't have power? What's going on? And you can talk about the grid, you can talk about the feeder lines. All they care about is getting power back to their home. And that restoration effort is very critical to make sure that we can support our overall community and get back to the way we were before the impact. FPL provided a improvement plan or improvement summary as part of this effort that identify a wide range of different activities that they're engaged in, from inspecting poles out there on a regular basis, to inspecting power lines, to maintaining, which is a very difficult task to do here in Florida, maintaining a vegetative maintenance plan for a lot of these power lines. You know, with vegetation, we're in Florida. Living here, the vegetation grows a lot, so keeping up with accessibility to a lot of these power lines and power infrastructure is very critical, and the vegetation has to be maintained to a point where the accessibility to be able to restore these items are very critical. Also, one of the issues that was brought up here is the pinging meters. Some folks, the power company would ping the homes and will identify that they have power, but the fact is it only pings to the meter. And the fact was the house was not energized whatsoever. And that represents a kind of a false representation of how accurate the information is getting in. And we in Orlando had several commissioners contacting me and contacting our power company, OUC, saying, hey, we have 100% restoration in this neighborhood. And the commissioner will come back and say, well, wait a minute, I just walked that neighborhood and I have neighbors telling me that their house don't have power. And again, it was because the meters on the wall were either disconnected from the home. So there's other means of being able to reach a more concrete way of identifying if those houses are energized or not. And we spoke briefly about using cable boxes through our cable companies out there to be able to identify if homes do have or don't have power. The prioritized lift station and traffic lights with FPL. I understand that a lot of the public works personnel did a phenomenal job in juggling generators from one point to another within the county. That is a very challenging task to maintain the movement of water from point A to point B and moving generators to sustain an operation from that perspective. But there also needs to be a joint plan, county, cities, power company, to prioritize the utilization of generators, perhaps identifying emergency contracts with generators that can provide that services to provide an extra fleet of X amount of numbers of generators that could be easily deployed, easily utilized. And again, the challenge with that is when you have some type of emergency contract to that capacity is that if a hurricane is coming, that commodity of generator is being requested by every other jurisdiction in the area. So again, having pre-established contracts and pulling the trigger to bring those resources in is critical. Tactical first-in team pair with FPL and train with equipment. I think this is an issue that is, we experienced this in the city of Orlando. Public Works or fire personnel would start deploying out there to identify, hey, what are the damages, what roads are closed due to downed trees. And the reports will come in and say, well, there's some type of cable entangled in that tree and we're not gonna touch it. It's very critical, and we had this issue as well, to tie in our power, our utility experts with our public safety apparatus, so jointly they can deploy out, and when they come across a tree or a down line that they can identify, yes, this is a down line, but it's not energized, it's safe to remove the tree and cut it off to the side. And this involves coordination, planning, coordination, and of course training, the proper marking of the cabling on these trees so our public safety don't get hurt in dealing with a down tree with some type of power line entanglement. That is very critical. And you know, it's challenging to survive the storm, but then is a major impact if we lose somebody after the storm due to a incident of not being at the right place or did not know that that line was energized or not. So these are the critical issues that we have identified as part of the peer review here. And again, I'm very proud to live in a community and very proud to have public servants that are willing to roll up their sleeves and engage in the community and get the community back to the way they were prior to the storm and making it better. I think having the power company involved with the local government is very critical. It is a need to make sure they're part of that emergency operations center, is part of that emergency management team, and ensure that that coordination is maintained prior, during, and after a major storm is as very vital as well. So with that said, thank you very much for the opportunity, and leave it back to Chris.